I was 18 when I met my grandfather for the first time. My dad had always been cagey about his parents. Every time I brought them up growing up, he'd shut down. Just a blank look and a shake of the head. They're not part of our lives, and that's final. At some point, I stopped asking. The subject seemed radioactive. But when I got accepted to a college out near the Western Hills, a town called Gray Pines, something tugged at me. A name popped up when I was unpacking my stuff for freshman year, Lodell. It was printed on the return address of a birthday card I didn't remember getting, buried deep in an old shoebox. George and Marilyn Winters. P.O. Box 14. Lodell? Or, I don't know why, but it stuck in my head. A week later, I skipped class, rented a beat-up Civic off a friend for cash, and drove the hour out to Lodell. The town felt off. Not weird in a haunted, cobwebbed way. Just wrong in that subtle, small-town way where people stop talking when you walk past, where the streets are too quiet, where you feel like you're being watched even when no one's around. The Winters house was a slouched, sprawling ranch-style home, surrounded by fog-cloaked pines and a rusted chain-link fence. I almost turned around twice before I finally knocked. And then I met George. He swung the door open like he'd been standing behind it, grinning wide with that kind of charisma you only see in preachers or politicians. His voice was deep, booming, almost musical when he said my name. Eli, my boy, you look just like her. I didn't ask who her was. I was too stunned. He was enormous, not just tall, but big in a way that made the doorway look too narrow. His arms were thick as tree limbs, his gut hung over his belt like a barrel, and yet he moved with this odd grace, like a bear that knew how to waltz. And behind him, peeking out like a ghost, was my grandmother Marilyn. Small, pale, barely breathing. She hugged me like I was a dream she didn't believe was real. The first night was strange but peaceful. George cooked a massive dinner: steak, sausages, fried chicken, whole racks of ribs. Enough for a dozen people. I figured he was just excited, but he ate everything. I had one plate. Marilyn picked at some mashed potatoes. George? He devoured every slab of meat on the table, licking grease from his fingers, cracking bones with his teeth like candy canes. And then he went back to the kitchen and pulled out more. The whole fridge had been stuffed with meat. Raw, marbled, dark stuff. Gotta keep the tank full, he said with a wink. That night, I barely slept. Not because of anything specific, just a sense of unease. I heard floorboards creaking, a low growl once from the basement, but I chalked it up to old house noises in my imagination. The second day was when things started to fray. I went into town to grab coffee and found flyers stapled to the poles. Lost dog. Charlie, reward if found. Another one next to it for a missing cat. Then a rabbit. Then another dog. At least 8 missing animal posters, all recent. At the diner, I overheard a woman whispering to the cook that someone had found a pile of bones in the woods behind the school. Stripped clean. That night, George cooked again. Pork shoulder, chicken thighs, a whole roast. He pushed food on me with almost frantic cheer. You're too skinny, he said, slapping my back. Gotta put some meat on your bones. Marilyn just watched, pale, silent. Later, I helped her wash dishes. She kept glancing down the hallway like she didn't want to be heard. I told him not to invite you, she said suddenly. Her voice was like crumpled paper. He said he didn't, but I saw the card. I froze. I don't understand it. She looked at me then, and her eyes were full of something I didn't expect. Terror. You need to leave before the freezer runs out. I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking, but she didn't smile. The next morning, George was already cooking when I got up. Blood pooled on the counter from some kind of raw meat. His hands were slick with it. Town's got a wildlife problem, he said. Coyotes maybe. Keeps dragging garbage out by the road. I had to set some traps. Don't worry, I'll clean up the mess. I asked if I could explore the woods nearby. Needed some air. He stared at me for a beat too long. Don't go north, he said. That side's private. I walked anyway, but kept south. About a half-mile in, I found a pile of bones. Not small ones. Long, curved, and broken open like something had sucked the marrow out. There was a collar in the dirt nearby. Charlie. I left the woods and decided I'd seen enough. My plan was to pack that night, sneak out early, head back to campus before anyone woke up. But Marilyn caught me before dinner. She pressed something into my hand. A key. Old, rusted. Attic, she whispered. If anything happens tonight, go up, not out. I tried to ask why, but she turned away. Dinner was quieter. George was sweating, breathing heavy, but grinning like always. He chewed through his plate like a machine. That night, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to a sound I'll never forget. Not a scream, not even a yell. It was chewing. Wet, loud, obscene chewing. And beneath it, another sound. Bones cracking. Then a soft, horrible moan that turned into a gurgle. I crept out of bed. The hallway light was off, but the living room was glowing orange with firelight. I crept closer. George was hunched over Marilyn's body. She wasn't moving. Her stomach, her whole midsection, was torn open. And George was eating. His body looked wrong, bloated to nearly double its size. His spine twisted up like a snake through his back. His skin was tight and shiny, stretched too thin. And he was crying. "I'm sorry, baby," he sobbed through mouthfuls. I tried. I really did. Then he stopped, lifted his head, sniffed the air. I ran. I barely made it into the attic and locked the hatch before I heard him thunder down the hallway, the walls shaking as he slammed into doors. "Eli," he sang, "come on, now. Don't be scared. Family feeds family." He paced the halls all night, moaning, growling, scratching at the attic door. And then, just as dawn broke, I heard voices. Children, laughing. I peered through the attic vent and saw 3 kids from the neighborhood walking up the drive. George stood in the doorway, looking like his old self. Shirt stretched tight, hands behind his back, smiling like the sun. "You kids want to hear a story," he said. They followed him in, and the door shut. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have blacked out for a while. Maybe my brain couldn't handle what it heard next. Screaming. The kind only kids can make when they realize too late that they trusted the wrong adult. I woke up to silence. Thick, awful silence. I stayed in the attic until the light through the vent told me it was late morning. Then I climbed down, every part of me shaking. The hallway smelled like raw meat and rot. Something had been smeared along the walls, handprints, dark and glistening. Marilyn was gone. So were the kids. But the floor. There were drag marks. Streaks of something dark and drying that led to the basement. I didn't go down there. I didn't need to. I grabbed my bag and sprinted out the back door, barefoot, not even caring that I left my shoes upstairs. I just ran. Down the dirt road, past the mailbox, through a ditch, until I hit the gas station on the edge of town. The clerk took one look at me, shirt-stained, barefoot, crying, and called the cops. I told them everything. They drove back out to the Winters house while I sat wrapped in a foil blanket. They found nothing. No bodies. No blood. Just an old man named George, who told them I'd had a psychotic break. He showed them a photo of me as a kid, claimed I'd been in and out of institutions. They didn't arrest him. They didn't even search the basement. One officer drove me back to campus and gave me a stern warning about false reports. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Couldn't eat. Couldn't think. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, George, that smile, those hands, the way he bent over her like he was praying and feeding at the same time. I called my dad. He picked up on the first ring. "I went to see him," I said. There was a pause. "Don't say anything else," he said. "I'm coming to get you." He showed up that night, drove me to a cheap motel 2 towns over, and we didn't talk until morning. He sat on the edge of the bed, chain-smoking, eyes bloodshot. "I told you to stay away," he said. "I begged you." I asked him what George was. He didn't answer at first, just stared at the motel carpet like it was moving. Then he told me the truth. "He's not my father," he said. "Not by blood. Not by anything human. My dad had been a foster kid in the 80s. Passed around a dozen homes before landing with George and Marilyn at 16. Said George was magnetic back then, too strong, funny, generous. But there were rules," he said. "We weren't allowed to eat meat in the house. Ever. And George would disappear for days. One night, my dad snuck into the basement. Found a pit covered with plywood. Inside, a pile of bones, animal at first. Then human. A jawbone with braces. A child's shoe. He ran, but Marilyn tracked him down. Told him to stay quiet. Said she was keeping George fed as best she could. That if they left, George would follow. But he always did. But I couldn't leave him alone, my dad said, eyes brimming. He came back. With you. I blinked. What? You were 3 months old. Found in the passenger seat of his truck, covered in blood. He said you were his son. My dad tried to call the police, but George vanished before they arrived. No trace of any crime scene. No missing person report that matched. Just a baby. He kept me. Raised me himself. I thought if I loved you hard enough, it wouldn't matter what he was, he said. But you went back. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Because suddenly everything made sense. The way George looked at me, not with love, with hunger, with possession, like something he'd created and lost and was waiting to reclaim. I stayed with my dad the rest of that year, transferred schools, tried to rebuild, but I keep track of Lodell. Every so often, I check the local forums, the neighborhood Facebook pages. Always the same story. More missing pets, strange lights in the woods, children that don't come home. I know he's still there, still feeding. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I swear I see it, the same grin, the same eyes. Sometimes I wonder what's in my blood, what's waiting to wake up. I don't remember the exact day things started going wrong, not precisely. But if I had to trace it back to a moment that changed everything, it would be the morning Lily found a spider in her hair. We were sitting on the back porch, drinking coffee. It was early spring, still cold enough for sweaters, but warm enough to start thinking about planting again. I remember because Lily loved that porch. She'd spend hours out there, sipping tea, reading, watching birds. It was her place. That morning, she flinched hard enough to spill her coffee. She clawed at her scalp, screaming. Not loud, just this desperate, panicked sound like something had already burrowed in. I stood up, thinking maybe a wasp had stung her, but then I saw it. A spider, no bigger than a nickel, crawled down the back of her hair and dropped onto the wood floor. She stomped it before I could even react. Then she just stood there, shaking, her hands still tangled in her hair. She didn't sit back down, didn't even go inside right away. Just stood there staring at the mess of legs she'd smashed. Her coffee dripped off the porch rail. That night, she couldn't sleep. She said she felt tickling on her scalp. I checked her hair twice. Nothing. No bites. No redness. But she didn't believe me. She kept scratching at her head. Eventually, I went to the guest room. Over the next few days, it got worse. She stopped going outside entirely. She vacuumed the corners obsessively, spraying lemon-scented pesticide even in places we just cleaned. She taped up the air vents, rolled towels under the doorways. I tried to be patient. Told myself it was just a passing thing. Maybe she'd had a bad dream or something. But then I caught her in the bathroom, shining her phone light directly into her ear canal, crying quietly. When I asked her what she was doing, she told me she could hear them. She said it like a confession, like she didn't want to believe it either. At first, I thought it was stress. She'd lost her mom a few months before. They'd been close, and grief does weird things. But then she started showing me photos. Tiny, blurry pictures of bite marks she swore were new. I couldn't see anything. She said they moved at night, that she could feel legs crawling up her legs. She stopped sleeping in the bed, started sleeping on the tile floor in the laundry room. And her hair, she started shaving it off. Not all at once, little by little. First it was just trimming it shorter, then buzzing off the sides. Eventually, she took a straight razor to her scalp and left it raw and patchy. I tried to get her to see someone, a therapist, a doctor, anyone, but she wouldn't leave the house. She said they'd follow her. One night, I woke up to the sound of the smoke alarm going off. I found her in the kitchen, holding a mixing bowl full of burning hair. Her own hair. The smell was disgusting, like melted plastic and metal. She told me she'd found a nest in her scalp, that they'd been laying in her thoughts. That was the first time I was genuinely scared of her. I tried calling her sister, but Lily screamed when she found out. She screamed until she threw up, said I was trying to expose her, that they'd know if she left, that they could see through people. I wish I'd done more. Called 911, forced her into a hospital, but I didn't. I was tired, confused, and honestly, I was starting to feel off myself. Some days I'd forget what I'd been doing. I'd go to make coffee and realize I already had, or I'd find my phone in the fridge or the car keys in the medicine cabinet. I chalked it up to stress. I mean, watching someone fall apart like that, it wears you down. Then the spiders came. At first, just little ones, harmless looking. I'd find one on the bathroom mirror or crawling across the baseboard. But no matter how many I killed, more showed up. I'd spray, vacuum, set traps, nothing worked. One night I was brushing my teeth and looked up to see one on the ceiling, just above my head. It wasn't moving, just hanging there, legs spread wide, like it was watching me. I stood there with the brush still in my mouth, staring at it for what felt like 5 minutes. When I finally moved to swat it, it was already gone. I found webs in the vents, in the back of the closet, inside the TV stand. And Lily, she changed. I don't know how else to put it. She got quiet. Still, she'd just sit for hours in the dark, not moving, not blinking. Her skin got pale, almost grayish, and there was this smell coming from her, like wet soil and vinegar. She stopped eating anything but eggs, boiled eggs. She'd peel them slowly and eat them without salt, no plate, standing at the sink like she was waiting for something. I remember asking her, "Are you okay?" She turned to me, dead-eyed, and said, "Too late for questions." She said it like it was someone else's voice. Lower, flat, not angry, just final. I started sleeping with the door locked. I told myself I was just being cautious, but every night, I'd hear her walking around. Not pacing, just slow, deliberate steps, back and forth, sometimes stopping right outside my door. And then one night, the door was open. I know I locked it. I remember locking it. But when I woke up, it was wide open, and Lily wasn't in the house. I found her in the backyard, barefoot, staring at the shed we never used. It was covered in webs, thick, white strands hanging from the roof like sheets. I swear they hadn't been there the day before. I told myself it was just dew, that I was seeing things. Lily turned to me and smiled. Her teeth were covered in something black. I don't think it was dirt. It looked thick, like tar. I backed away, told her to come inside. She didn't follow. That night, I woke up with a spider on my chest. I didn't scream, didn't move. I just watched it crawl across me and disappear into the sheets. I never found it. But after that, things unraveled fast. I started hearing noises in the walls. Clicking, tapping, like dozens of legs scuttling through the drywall. I tore open the pantry and found a hollow space behind it, completely packed with webs and husks of flies and beetles. I tried to tell someone, my brother, a friend from work, but whenever I spoke about it, I'd forget what I was saying halfway through, like my thoughts were being rethreaded. I caught myself mumbling at night, strange phrases I didn't recognize. Once I looked in the mirror and didn't move, but my reflection did. And Lily? She stopped pretending to be Lily. At least not the Lily I knew. She didn't blink anymore, not in the normal way. Her eyes would stay wide for minutes, then shut all at once like shutters. One night, I found her crouched in the corner of our bedroom, completely naked, biting at her arm. She was pulling at something beneath the skin. When she saw me, she said, "They're inside. They're teaching me." And she smiled. I left that night. I drove until I didn't recognize the road, parked outside a diner, and sat in the lot until morning. I didn't sleep. I didn't even go inside. I just sat there, watching the sky change colors. When I finally went home, the house was silent. But the air smelled wrong, like mold and vinegar. And on the living room ceiling, there were hundreds of them, motionless, watching, just hanging there, waiting. I don't even remember walking into the house. One second I was standing in the doorway, staring up at the ceiling, and the next, I was in the kitchen, just standing there, breathing like I'd been running, with no memory of how I got there. There were eggs boiling on the stove. I don't eat eggs. The walls were buzzing, faintly, like an old fluorescent light. But it wasn't electricity. It sounded organic, twitchy, dry, like chitin rubbing against drywall. I started calling her name, Lily, over and over. My voice didn't sound right in the room. Too thin, echoed like the walls had shifted. I heard her footsteps upstairs, slow and deliberate. I didn't go up. Instead, I walked into the laundry room. I don't know why. Maybe part of me hoped I'd find her huddled on the tile floor again, crying and reachable. But she wasn't there. What was there, though, was a dead cat. I don't know where it came from. We didn't own a cat, but it had been partially eaten, its chest cavity torn open, hollowed out. Inside, tucked into the red mess, was a web, a soft, silvery cradle. And inside that, what looked like a small, pulsating sac. Breathing, moving. I backed out of the room and threw up in the sink. Then I noticed the hair. Long strands of black hair stuck to the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. Not just falling loosely, woven into the webbing, as if it had been used like thread. I tried to tell myself it wasn't hers, that maybe it had come from the cat, but I already knew. I left again. I went to the neighbor's place across the street. Mr. Halvorson, retired dentist. He was quiet, kind, always waved when he saw us. He hadn't been outside in a while, now that I thought about it. His windows were fogged from the inside, covered in grime. I knocked on the door. Nothing. Knocked again. Louder. The door creaked open. I should have left. The smell hit me first. Wet mulch, spoiled meat, something burnt and chemical. The air inside was thick and heavy, like walking into a damp attic in the middle of summer. I stepped inside and froze. Every surface was covered in webbing, thick strands from floor to ceiling, stretching across furniture like tissue. Some pulsed faintly. There was a sound, like gentle breathing, from somewhere deeper in the house. I called out. No answer. I moved forward anyway. Each step pulled at something. Hair, web, skin? I couldn't tell. I tried not to look too closely. The hallway led toward the living room. I stepped around a collapsed lamp and paused. He was there. Halvorsen, or what was left of him. He was stuck upright to the wall like a painting. Cocooned, but not fully. His eyes were open. His mouth too, like he'd died mid-scream. His chest twitched occasionally, like something inside was still moving. I ran. I don't remember making it home. I just remember the front door slamming behind me, my lungs scraping for air. I grabbed the can of gasoline I'd kept in the garage for the mower and dumped it across the floors. Kitchen, living room, stairs. I didn't think. I lit a match. The fire caught fast. Too fast. The webbing flared like dry paper. I backed out the front door and watched as the house bloomed orange from inside. For a second, I thought I saw her, Lily, standing in the upstairs window, watching me. Her skin pale, her eyes sunken, her mouth open wider than it should have gone. Just watching. Then the window cracked and burst in flames. The fire department came. So did the police. I don't remember talking to them. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in a white room, strapped to a bed, with N4 in my arm and dried blood under my nails. They said I'd had a psychotic break, said I was hallucinating, that there were no bodies found in the house. No signs of spiders. No Halvorsen. No webbing. Just a burned-out shell of a home and a man babbling nonsense. They think I did it all. That I killed my wife. That I burned my own house down to cover it up. I can't prove otherwise. There's nothing left. But they're wrong about one thing. They think I'm better now. But I'm not. I feel them at night, moving inside me, nesting. Sometimes I wake up with strands of silk stuck to my hands. I find insects in my bed, dead ones, arranged in patterns I don't understand. The orderlies keep changing. They say it's scheduling, but I know better. They watch me. They don't blink enough. One of them, the new nurse, Cora, I caught her once just standing in the corner of my room at night, silent, smiling. She didn't move when I spoke, just tilted her head slowly and said, "Are they speaking to you yet?" I screamed until I passed out. But it doesn't matter anymore. It's too late. I can feel the eggs. They're hatching. I'm not sure when things stopped making sense. I keep replaying it in my head, trying to find the point where reality started to slip, where he got in. It started with a late Thursday session. I'm a licensed therapist in upstate New York. Private practice. Nothing fancy. Most of my clients deal with anxiety, family trauma, the usual. But Eric was different. He came through a court-mandated program after a bar fight. Mild stuff. First offense. That's how he ended up in my office. For the first 3 sessions, he barely spoke. Just sat there, arms crossed, eyes scanning the books on my shelf like he was memorizing the titles. Session 4 was when things changed. He was 20 minutes late, walked in drenched sweat, not rain, and sat down across from me without saying a word. I gave him space, let the silence stretch. Then, just above a whisper, he said, "I killed her." I didn't say anything at first. I've heard dramatics before, people trying to shock or test boundaries. But Eric wasn't performing. His jaw was clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. He looked at me with this kind of dead calm. Not angry, not scared, just done. I asked him to clarify. He leaned in and said it again, this time like a confession to God. "I killed her. I watched her die. I didn't stop it. I followed protocol, asked if anyone was in immediate danger, if this was hypothetical, metaphorical, a past event." He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "This was 3 nights ago. She's still out there, in the woods. No one's found her." I felt a chill. It's rare, but when someone confesses to an active crime, we're mandated to report it. I started writing notes discreetly, but then he added something that made my skin crawl. "You said it would help. You said, if I could just feel something real, I might start to heal." My pen stopped. "I never said that," I told him. Calm, but firm. He smiled, just a flicker. "You did. That first session, right before you counted down. You asked me to close my eyes. Now I was off balance. I had never attempted hypnotherapy with Eric. It's not even something I offer anymore. But he insisted, described it like it was yesterday. You said to imagine her face, he went on. You asked me how I'd feel if she disappeared. I ended the session early and called the non-emergency line after he left, reporting a possible threat. They took my statement. I didn't hear anything for 2 days. Then the body was found. A hiker spotted it half buried in a shallow grave about 30 minutes from my office, near a trail I used to jog every Saturday. The woman, early 20s, no ID. Blunt force trauma. I recognized the location the moment the detective showed me the photos, because I had dreamed about that place. A week earlier. A recurring nightmare. Same crooked tree, same slope in the clearing. I hadn't told anyone about it, not even my wife. The next few days blurred. I got a visit from Detective Marks, blunt guy. Looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. He asked a few questions about Eric. I gave him what I could, within limits. But something in his tone had shifted. Not curiosity. Suspicion. That weekend, my professional Facebook page was suspended. I don't even use it anymore, but I logged in to check. There were 3 posts I didn't write. One said, confronting guilt is the only path to peace, even if it costs you everything. Another had a photo of the trailhead where the body was found. The last one was a quote I've never used. We all have someone we want to disappear. I deleted them, reported the account as hacked. My wife thought maybe it was some sick prank, but then came the fingerprints. Mark showed up again, told me flat out that partial prints had been found on the woman's phone. Mine. That didn't make sense. I'd never seen her before. I wasn't even sure if she was real until the news named her Julia Barrett, student from SUNY Albany. No record of us ever crossing paths. But when they asked Eric, he changed his story. Said I gave him the idea, that I had been guiding him, gradually, across multiple sessions, into a dissociative state. That I hypnotized him to suppress my own guilt, to turn him into a scapegoat. It was absurd, but I could see it in the eyes of the detectives. The way they looked at me, like I was already halfway gone. My practice was placed under review. Half my clients canceled. A week later, my office was vandalized. Red paint on the door that said Dr. Death. And then the dreams got worse. I'd wake up sweating, sheets twisted, the scent of wet soil clinging to my clothes. Once, I found dirt under my nails. I brushed it off as psychosomatic. Stress. Until the night I heard the scratching. It started in the bedroom wall. Faint, like the sound a mouse might make. Then it spread. I'd hear it in the ceiling, in the vents. A slow, persistent scrape, like nails, or a stick dragged against plaster. My wife didn't hear it. Said it was in my head. I started recording at night. Hours of static, mostly. Except once, at 3:47 a.m., a faint whisper. I played it back over and over. It said my name. I went to confront Eric during his next session. I told myself I'd stay calm, professional. But when he walked in, he looked at me with this smug familiarity, like we shared a joke no one else could understand. I asked him directly, "Why are you doing this?" He leaned back in the chair. "I told them everything you told me to say," he said. "Just like you wanted." I felt my skin crawl. "You were never supposed to forget," he added. That night, I found a Polaroid on my doorstep. A photo of Julia's body, still partially buried. Not the crime scene photo. A different angle. One that had to have been taken before the police arrived. On the back, in handwriting that looked eerily like mine, it said, "Help him process what he's done." I haven't slept in days. I'm starting to doubt what I know. I've searched my calendar, my session notes. Things are missing entire days, blacked out. I asked my wife if she remembers what we did the night of the murder. She hesitated. "You were working late," she said. "You said you had a client in crisis." But I didn't. Or at least, I don't remember having one. And last night, when I opened the closet to get my coat, I found something behind the shoe rack. A scrap of fabric. Stained. Torn. It looked like part of the dress Julia Barrett was wearing in the crime scene photos. My wife says it must have been planted, but she said it quickly. Too quickly. And this morning, there was a note taped to my mirror in that same handwriting. "Don't worry, doctor. It'll all make sense soon. I haven't left the house in 3 days. I keep telling myself it's because I'm under investigation that staying out of sight is smart. But the truth is, I'm afraid of what I'll find out there. I'm more afraid of what I might do out there. I keep catching glimpses of myself in reflective surfaces, and for a second, it's like I'm watching someone else, same face, same body, but with eyes that don't blink at the right times. That smile that lingers too long. This morning I found mud in the bathtub. Clumps of it, smeared across the porcelain like someone had been trying to clean off without using water. I checked the security cams. My wife and I were both home all night. The logs show no motion from the front or back doors. I used to trust my own mind. Now I check my phone constantly, scrolling through sent messages, looking for proof that I haven't lost time, that I'm still in control. But then there's Eric. He's in county lockup pending trial, and yet the effects of him, his voice, his presence, keep bleeding into my life. I got a call yesterday from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it 20 times since. It was me, my voice, but wrong, distorted somehow, slightly slower, heavier, like it had been dragged underwater. You have to finish what you started, it said. I called the precinct to see if Eric had been granted a call. They said yes, he used it to call his mother. But here's the thing. I found her obituary. She's been dead since 2019. That's when I started to wonder if this was more than a setup. If maybe I was sick. That maybe something was breaking inside me. Something that had always been there. I tried to talk to my wife, Rachel, about it. Tried to explain that I was afraid of myself. That I needed help. She told me she'd already been looking into it. Said she booked an appointment for me with someone named Dr. Linhart, a trauma specialist in the city. I'd never heard her mention this guy before. But I agreed. I needed someone, anyone, to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. The night before the appointment, I had another dream. I was in my office. Late. The clock on the wall was frozen at 3:07. I was sitting across from Eric, but he wasn't speaking. His mouth was moving, but the sound wasn't reaching me. Then, from behind him, someone else stepped into the room. A woman. It was Julia. She stood there with her head tilted at an impossible angle, staring straight at me. She mouthed something, slowly, over and over. You watched. I woke up with blood in my mouth. I'd bitten my tongue so hard in my sleep it had torn. There were scratch marks on the inside of my forearms, fresh, like I'd been trying to dig my way out of something. Rachel found me in the bathroom, trembling. We didn't say anything. The drive to Dr. Linhart's office was silent. It was in a converted brownstone, tucked between a pair of galleries downtown. She waited in the car while I went in. The receptionist greeted me by name. We've been expecting you, she said, without looking up. That should have been my first red flag. Dr. Linhart was tall, gaunt. His office smelled faintly of bleach and old wood. He didn't ask many questions, just stared at me for long stretches, nodding occasionally like he already knew where this was going. He told me I wasn't delusional, that what I was experiencing might be a kind of dissociative fugue triggered by buried trauma. That some patients, especially those in high-empathy professions like mine, sometimes absorb their clients' pain in dangerous ways. I asked him what he meant by absorb. He said something like, guilt can be contagious if the mind is open enough. At the end of the session, he handed me a folder. Said it contained exercises, ways to reclaim my memory, rebuild my cognitive anchors. When I got back to the car, Rachel was gone. Her phone was still in the cup holder. I waited an hour. Called her sister. Her job. No one had seen her. I went back inside. Asked the receptionist if she'd seen my wife. You came alone, she said. I checked the security cams outside the building. Footage was corrupted. When I got home, I opened the folder Dr. Linhart had given me. There were no exercises. Just photographs. Printed on old paper. Of me and Julia. Different locations. A diner. A park bench. A motel room. All dated within the last 6 months. There was no way they were real. In some of them, we were smiling. In one, she was sleeping beside me. I slammed the folder shut and threw it in the fireplace. But not before I saw the last page. It was a signed consent form. Patient name, Julia Barrett. Treating physician, doctor, my name. Therapeutic method, directed regression via induced state. Purpose, suppression of guilt and memory fragmentation. My signature was at the bottom. I hadn't signed it. That night, the scratching came back. Louder now. Aggressive. I tore open the drywall in the hallway and found something wedged between the studs. It was a cassette recorder. Old. Dusty. Still running. I pressed play. My voice started to speak. Session 1. Subject, Julia Barrett. Objectives, test boundary dissolution. Explore identity transference. I dropped it. Staggered back. I must have stood there for hours. Around 2 a.m., I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, no one was there. But sitting on the welcome mat was a single sheet of paper. A transcript of a recorded conversation. Eric, you sure he won't remember? Me, he can't. That's the point. Eric. And what about her? Me. She's already forgotten. We all have. I'm writing this now because I don't know who I am anymore. Maybe I did kill her. Maybe I helped someone else do it. Maybe I tried to erase myself from the truth. Program someone else to carry the weight. Maybe I was never the therapist. Just another patient, sitting across from someone I thought I understood. There's one more thing. I found a key tucked behind the mirror in our bathroom. It has a tag that says Storage Unit 47A. I don't recognize it, but something in me does. I'm going there tomorrow, if I don't come back. I hope to God I never remember why. I want to make one thing clear right off the bat. I'm not a ghost. I bleed, I breathe, I still cast a reflection. Whatever I become, it wasn't born in a grave or summoned in some ritual. It was born the night Mel betrayed me, in the day I almost died. Mel and I were together for 3 years. We met through mutual friends at a dive bar in Philadelphia, the kind of place that smells like spilled beer and old wood. She was magnetic, smart, effortlessly funny, and sharp in a way that made you feel both seen and scrutinized. I fell hard, harder than I probably should have. I thought we were solid. Of course, in hindsight, there were cracks. Texts she didn't want me to see. Nights she'd come home smelling like someone else's cologne. But I was so deep in it, I rationalized everything. She was busy, stressed, just going through something. It all imploded one Thursday in April. I came home early from work to surprise her flowers, take out from that Thai place she loved. I still remember the way the keys shook in my hand as I opened the door. The smell hit me before the sound did. Sweat, sex, perfume that wasn't hers. She was in bed with him. Some guy named Trey, apparently. Younger than me, cockier, probably still thought consequences were for other people. They didn't even try to hide it. She looked at me like I was the one who'd crossed a line. I stood there frozen, while he, naked, smug, had the balls to tell me to get the fuck out. That night, I drove for hours. Didn't know where I was going, just away. I don't remember the moment the car hit black ice, but I remember the feeling right before. That split second where your stomach drops and your brain goes dead quiet. Then, metal shrieking, glass bursting, the world flipping. They told me I was lucky to be alive. Broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, concussion, but I made it. I should have been grateful. I wasn't. In that liminal space between life and death, something had changed. Something came back with me. At first, it was easy to write off. The feeling of being watched, normal for trauma. The whispers at night, probably the painkillers. The dreams, though, those were harder to explain. They weren't nightmares, not exactly. They were memories, but wrong, twisted. I'd see myself standing at the edge of Mel's bed while she slept, watching her, whispering things in a voice that wasn't mine but somehow was. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, and yet calm, like something inside me was being soothed. Then I started seeing him, Trey, not in dreams, in real life, at the gym, at a gas station near my apartment, even once in line at a coffee shop. I wasn't following him, not consciously, but he was always there, like gravity had shifted and he was in my orbit. And every time I saw him, I'd feel it, that presence. It's hard to explain. Like a second set of lungs breathing in sync with mine, a shadow leaning just slightly ahead of me. I started noticing changes. My reflection, at times, would seem to smirk when I wasn't. My thoughts, darker, colder, weren't easily dismissed anymore. One night, I caught myself just standing outside Trey's apartment building. I don't even remember driving there. I was just there, hoodie up, standing in the rain, watching his window on the second floor. That's when the voice spoke. Not in my head, not some metaphor. A real voice, hoarse and low, like dry leaves being crushed. She made this. I spun around. No one was there. Just an empty sidewalk and the sound of rain on asphalt. I didn't sleep that night. I tried to distract myself, movies, YouTube rabbit holes, cold showers. But the next morning, I found a key in my jacket pocket. A simple brass key, unmarked. I didn't know where it had come from, but I knew what it opened. Trey's door. I don't remember all of what happened next. That part comes to me in flashes. I remember the lock clicking open, smooth like it was meant to. I remember the soft blue glow of his TV in the dark. I remember how easy it was to walk through his place without a sound, like the air itself parted for me. He was asleep on the couch, mouth slightly open, controller still in his hand. I stared at him for a long time. I wanted to see if I felt guilt, shame, anything. I didn't. I felt justified. He never screamed. Not once. I don't even think he saw me. And when it was done, the blood pooled like it had somewhere to be organized, intentional, like part of a design. I left the same way I came in. Quiet, efficient, invisible. The news said it was a break-in gone wrong. Mel didn't comment, but I knew she knew. Because that night, she called me, just breathing on the other end. And I knew she saw me somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. A shadow behind her shower curtain, a figure on the fire escape. Maybe just the feeling of hands about to touch her neck, even when she was alone. Over the next few weeks, she unraveled. She called the cops twice, convinced someone was inside her apartment. They never found anything. She started leaving voicemails for me, shaky, desperate ones. Please stop. Please. I didn't mean for any of it. I never responded, but I listened to everyone. And each time, I felt something in me grow quieter, calmer, like I was being fulfilled, like I was becoming complete. She stopped showing up to work. Her social media went dark. Mutual friends said she checked herself into a facility upstate. Stress, they said. Breakdown. Maybe that's true. But she knows the truth. And so do I. She didn't just break my heart. She created something. A version of me that doesn't need food or sleep, doesn't hesitate, doesn't feel pity. Not a ghost. Not a demon. Just what's left when love dies the worst way possible. And I'm still here. Watching. Waiting. Because there are others like her. And I think this is only the beginning. I didn't plan on seeing her again. After the last voicemail, the one where she was crying and whispering my name like she wasn't sure if she hated me or missed me, I figured that was it. She'd fade out of her life, and I'd keep being whatever I'd become. But I saw her again, a few months later. I was walking past a corner bodega near Kensington late one night when I felt that familiar tug in my chest. That gravity. I looked up, and there she was. Mel, standing across the street, frozen mid-step. She looked thinner, pale. Her hair was pulled back like she hadn't washed it in a while. She was with someone, an older woman in scrubs, probably one of the aides from whatever facility she'd checked into. They were heading back to some halfway house, I guessed. For a split second, our eyes met, and she screamed. Right there, on the sidewalk. Just this raw, broken, animal sound. The woman grabbed her and tried to calm her down, but Mel was pointing at me, shaking, saying things like, "He's not dead," and "It's him. I told you he wasn't human." Cars slowed. A few people looked over. I just turned and walked away. But that moment did something to me. Until then, I've been drifting, feeding off something I didn't understand, haunting her because she made me into this. But that scream? That was the first time I realized I didn't just haunt her. I terrified her. And I liked it. I know how that sounds. I really do. But when everything that made you human gets stripped away, all that's left is instinct. And mine had been rewired. I started to crave that look. The one she gave me before the scream, pure recognition, pure horror. I wanted to be that shadow behind the glass, that breath down someone's neck when they know they're alone. So I started picking people. Not random ones. Not good people. I found a guy named Mason who used to date a girl I barely knew in college. She left school after he beat her so badly she needed facial reconstruction. I never knew her well, but I remembered her eyes, how she never looked anyone in the face again. Mason worked at an auto shop out in Bensalem. I waited until he was alone, walking to his truck at night, and I made sure he saw me first. Just a flicker, me standing under the streetlight, my head tilted, face half in shadow. He stopped cold. "Yo, what the fuck?" I didn't answer. Just stepped forward once. He went for the glove box in his truck. I let him. It didn't matter. By the time the wrench clattered to the ground, his eyes had gone glassy. Not from pain, from confusion. Like he couldn't understand how fast it had happened. I whispered to him before he went under. She made me. I never got caught. I never even got close. And with each one, each scumbag or predator or abuser, I felt that thing inside me stretch out further. Like it had roots. Like it was becoming permanent. But Mel? She stayed at the center of it. And then one night, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. An actual handwritten letter slipped under my apartment door. No return address, just my name. It said, "I know what you're doing. I know what you've become. And I think you're right. I did make you. But you don't scare me anymore. I want to see you. Come find me. You always do." There was an address scrawled in messy handwriting. A single-room cabin north of the city, probably where they'd moved her after the breakdown. It was bait. I knew that. But I couldn't stay away. The drive took almost 2 hours. Every mile, that voice inside me, the one that used to whisper from the edges, was dead silent. For the first time in months, I was the only one thinking. No whispers. No second set of lungs. Just me. When I pulled up, the place looked abandoned. Shutters hanging loose. No lights. Snow still piled along the edges of the steps. But the front door was unlocked. Inside, it was cold and sparse. One chair. One table. And her sitting cross-legged on the floor like she'd been waiting for days. Mel looked up and smiled. "Hey," she said. I didn't speak. I just closed the door behind me. "You look good," she added, though her voice trembled a little. "What do you want?" "I wanted to see if you'd come." I stepped closer. "Why wouldn't I?" She shrugged. "Because you already won. You destroyed me. Isn't that what you wanted?" "No," I said. "I wanted you to feel exactly what I felt." She stood up, slowly. "Then what now?" "You kill me." I didn't answer, but the silence said enough. "You're not what you think you are," she said suddenly. "I don't mean the ghost thing. I mean, you're not you. Not anymore." I took another step. She didn't back away. "Do it then," she whispered. But something held me in place. Not guilt, not pity, doubt. Because in that moment, I felt it again, the presence. But it wasn't inside me. It was behind her. A shape. Shifting, coiled in the corner of the cabin, blacker than the shadows. Watching me. Mimicking me. The whisper I'd grown used to wasn't in my head anymore. It was in the room. It said one word. No. I blinked, and it was gone. Mel's eyes widened. She hadn't seen it, but she felt it too. "What was that?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I turned and walked out. The thing is, I thought I'd brought something back with me. Something that grew inside me and turned me into this Avenger. But maybe I was never possessed. Maybe I was just followed. Copied. Watched. Maybe I was never alone at all. Now I wonder how many of us there are versions of me, of others, made from the moments that break us. Things shaped not from death, but from betrayal. Things that don't haunt people. They become them. I haven't seen Mel since that night. I don't need to. She doesn't sleep. She moves from place to place. She knows something's still with her. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's not. But I do know this. The thing that followed me out of that crash, it's still watching. And now, I think it's hungry again. I used to roll my eyes when parents said they had a bad feeling. That phrase always sounded like something you told yourself after the fact, like your brain trying to make sense of something senseless. But I swear, the moment I turned around and saw the empty patch of mulch where Daniel had just been playing, my whole body dropped into this cold, awful quiet, like every part of me had just stopped. It was a Tuesday, late spring. Our neighborhood does these casual morning playgroups at Larkspur Park. It's just a loop of parents, mostly moms like me, who bring their kids between 9 and 11 before it gets too hot. There's no sign up or anything. We just show up with thermoses and snacks and keep an eye out while the kids chase each other around the slides and the splash pad. That morning, I remember how bright everything looked. Like painfully bright. Daniel had on his blue Dino Explorer hoodie even though it was already 70 degrees by 9:30. He was obsessed with dinosaurs. Still is. Or was. He'd been playing by the climbing dome with a few of the other kids, nothing unusual. I remember crouching down to get something out of my bag, juice boxes maybe? I don't even think I was distracted for a full minute. But when I looked up again, Daniel wasn't there. Just gone. No scream. No footsteps. No nothing. I called his name, at first casual, then sharp. The other moms helped me search the whole park within 5 minutes. Nothing. Not behind the bathrooms, not near the creek. I ran through the parking lot, half expecting to see him crouched behind a car playing some game. I called 911 less than 10 minutes after I noticed he was gone. By then I was screaming his name so loud it didn't even sound like a word anymore. The police showed up fast. A K-9 unit, drones, volunteers, everyone combed the whole park, the trails behind it, the nearby neighborhoods. They found nothing. No clothing, no signs of a struggle, no footprints. Just like he'd been scooped off the face of the earth. I slept maybe 2 hours total over the next 3 days. I barely ate. People kept bringing me casseroles and coffee like that could do anything. I kept going back to the park at night, just walking the perimeter until I couldn't stand anymore. I think the worst part was the silence. No ransom call, no suspicious vehicles, no known predators in the area. Just Daniel's face on every telephone pole. He was 8. He still held my hand crossing the street. He hated the dark. Where the hell could he have gone? And then, after 13 days, they found him. It was a logging road about 12 miles east, out past Jefferson County. 2 hikers spotted him wandering barefoot near the tree line, caked in dirt, wearing the same clothes he'd vanished in. The blue hoodie was stiff with dried mud. He was dazed but otherwise unhurt. No bruises, no dehydration, nothing. I remember them calling me at 4 a.m., the detective's voice thin with disbelief. He's alive. I don't remember much about the drive to the hospital, just that I couldn't stop shaking. The nurses told me to be gentle, that he was in shock. I braced myself for crying, for hugging, for clinging. But Daniel didn't cry when he saw me. He didn't even smile. He just stared at me, blinking slowly like I was someone he recognized, but only vaguely. When I threw my arms around him, he let me, but it felt wrong. Stiff. Like hugging a pillow. They ran every test imaginable. Physically, he was fine. Perfect, actually. No signs of malnourishment. No bug bites. No injuries. When they asked where he'd been, he just shrugged and said, "I don't know. Trees." He wouldn't say anything else. He wouldn't even call it being lost. Just that he'd been waiting. For what? He didn't say. The therapist told me trauma could present this way. Disassociation. Emotional flatness. Regression. I tried to believe that. But once we brought him home, things started to feel off. It began with the way he moved. Daniel used to run everywhere. He was the kind of kid who bounced on furniture and tripped over his own shoelaces. But now he walked slowly. Too slowly. Always upright, like he was practicing. And sometimes I'd catch him watching me, really watching me from behind corners or across rooms, like he was studying how I poured milk or folded laundry. Like he was trying to memorize being human. He refused to let me help him change clothes, even when he was clearly cold. Wouldn't take his hoodie off, not even for bed. Once, when I finally insisted, I saw that his back had faint scratch marks on it. Parallel, like branches maybe? He said he didn't remember how they got there, but the skin around them was clean, like someone had already treated them. Then there was the humming. Daniel started humming little melodies when he thought no one could hear. Short loops of strange, uneven notes. I'd never heard anything like them. When I asked what he was singing, he said, "It helps me remember." Remember what? I asked. He paused, tilted his head. Where I was. I recorded it once on my phone and played it back later. There was this weird clicking sound layered behind it, like someone tapping with her teeth. I asked an audio engineer friend if it could have been background noise or artifacting. He listened and went pale. "There's something else in this recording," he said. "Something under the melody. It's rhythmic." He told me to delete it. I didn't. One night, I found Daniel standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., staring at the wall. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" He didn't turn around. "Making sure no one's here," he said quietly. That was the first time I felt fear. I started testing him in small ways. Asking him questions I knew he used to know. "What's your teacher's name? What's your favorite dinosaur? What song do we sing in the car?" He'd hesitate. Sometimes he got it right. But more often, he just watched my face while I waited for an answer, like he was gauging how much he should know. He started calling me Mom again, but the way he said it was cold. No affection. Like he was trying out the word, not feeling it. One morning, I went to wake him up and found him sitting upright in bed, eyes wide open. He said, "You blink 30 times a minute when you're lying." I didn't even know what to say. I started keeping a journal, writing down every weird thing. I showed some of it to our pediatrician, to the therapist. They were sympathetic, but firm. Trauma, they said, could alter memory, behavior, personality. It was all explainable. But I knew my son. I knew the way he used to giggle when he made up words. I knew the way he used to beg for just 5 more minutes of screen time. I knew how he clutched his stuffed pterodactyl like a lifeline when he was scared. And now, he sleeps without it. He eats with perfect manners. He doesn't laugh. Not once since he came back. I tried to brush his hair the other day. He flinched, then smiled in this odd, stretched way and said, "Sorry. Sometimes I forget what hurts." What does that even mean? I've started watching him like he watches me, noticing the way he never blinks unless he's thinking, how he's always listening, always aware. A week ago, I found these little piles of stones in the crawl space under the house, arranged in perfect spirals. I asked Daniel if he made them. He just said, "I had to." Why? To keep the quiet place closed. Last night, I heard him whispering to someone through the heat vent. When I opened the door, he was already in bed. I shut, pretending to snore. And yet, I'm the one people are starting to doubt. My sister told me gently that I need sleep. My husband thinks I'm spiraling. He says we should be grateful that we got a miracle, but I don't feel grateful. I feel like something came back wearing my son's skin, and I don't know how long it plans to stay, or if it's alone. I started locking my bedroom door at night. It made me feel insane. What kind of mother locks her door against her 8-year-old son? But I kept waking up with this pounding in my chest, like I was seconds behind something. Like I just missed catching him standing over me. Sometimes I swore I heard footsteps stop right outside my door. A light pressure on the floorboards. But when I opened it, nothing. Daniel always said he'd been asleep. I don't think I slept more than 3 hours at a stretch that whole month. My husband, Mark, started sleeping in the guest room after we fought about it for the 3rd time. He said the paranoia was eating me alive. Said Daniel needed love and stability, not suspicion. That I was projecting. You're grieving, he kept saying. You went through hell. You're allowed to be scared. But he's home. He's alive. I stopped trying to argue, because every time I did, I sounded more and more unhinged. And maybe I was. Maybe I am. But then who made the marks? 3 perfectly straight cuts appeared on Daniel's doorframe one morning. About 4 inches apart, maybe a 1/4 inch deep. Too clean to be from a toy. I showed Mark. He blamed it on the old wood. A day later, I noticed the same pattern carved into the underside of our dining table. Then the stair railing. Then, horrifyingly, the inside of the bathroom mirror. Behind the glass. When I asked Daniel if he did it, he just smiled and said, "They're reminders, so I don't forget." I asked, "Forget what?" He looked at me with this blank patience that chilled me to my bones. What I am. I didn't cry. I just walked out of the room and sat in my car for almost an hour, shaking. I tried calling the detective from the original case, just to talk. To ask if he thought Daniel had maybe been taken by someone. Conditioned somehow. I kept the questions vague. He was polite but distant. Said the case was closed unless new evidence came up. Then he said something strange. He said, "You're the 4th parent I've talked to this year who said something like this. Kid goes missing, turns up weeks later, won't say where they were." That stopped me cold. Do they act different? I asked. He was quiet for a second too long. I didn't say that. Then he hung up. I started trying to find them, the other parents. I didn't have much to go on, but I remembered reading an article about a girl in New Hampshire who vanished for 9 days in January, found barefoot on a frozen pond, no signs of exposure. Another kid in Utah. Similar patterns. I started compiling them, writing their names down. I couldn't find much, just scattered references and dead links. But there was a Reddit thread, archived. A parent asking, "Has anyone else's missing kid come back?" Wrong? It had been deleted, but not before I saw one reply. Check their reflection. That's where you see it. They're good at the face, but they don't know how to copy the eyes. I didn't want to believe it. But the next morning, I sat Daniel down in front of the bathroom mirror and watched him while he brushed his teeth. He didn't look at himself once. Not even a glance. And when I asked him to, he gave me this tight little smile and said, "I don't like mirrors. They hum too loud." That night, I checked every mirror in the house after he went to bed. I couldn't explain it. Maybe it was suggestion. Maybe just sleep deprivation. But when I stared long enough, the reflection of Daniel didn't quite match. It moved with him. Yes, matched his posture. But there was no softness. No delay. The eyes locked onto mine without blinking. The corners of the mouth never relaxed. It looked like him, but it didn't feel like anyone was behind the eyes. Things escalated from there. I started noticing patterns. The same pile of sticks appearing outside the back door every 3 days. Always arranged the same way. Long, short, long, short. One morning I found a dead crow placed on the doormat, its beak wide open like it had died mid-screen. Daniel walked right past it without flinching. Then he started talking in his sleep, not mumbling full sentences. I'd stand outside his room and hear his voice, flat and rhythmic, like he was reciting something. We learn the shape. We wear the name. We eat the sound. We stay until the skin breaks. I recorded it, played it for Mark. He told me it was a nightmare. Said I was feeding into it. I know what I heard. I know what I saw. I started hiding knives. Not because I thought he'd hurt me, just because I didn't know what he'd do if he remembered whatever he was. One night I broke down and asked him, point blank, "Are you really Daniel?" He looked up at me, still chewing his cereal, and said, "Would it be better if I wasn't?" Then he blinked, tilted his head, and added, "I can be more like him if you want." I think that was the moment I finally broke. I packed a bag that night, took my journal, The recordings, the phone with the humming audio. I left Daniel with Mark and drove 6 hours to a woman named Carla, the mother from that article in New Hampshire. I'd found her through a Facebook group for missing kids. She hadn't posted in months, but I still had the name. When I showed up at her door, she looked at me like she already knew. We didn't even say hello. She just asked, "How long was yours gone?" 13 days, I said. She nodded. Mine was 15. He doesn't blink when the lights are on. We sat at her kitchen table, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel crazy. She showed me photos, drawings her son had done. Spirals, cages, long-limbed things with mirrored faces. She said the therapist told her it was trauma too. Said she almost believed it until the day she found him sitting in the bathtub full of ice, whispering, "Cold keeps them asleep." She said she tried to get help, but no one listens when your kid is smiling and clean and doing well in school. We traded stories for hours. Patterns. Phrases. One constant was the humming. And the reflection. It wasn't just her. There were others. A message board where people had started connecting. Secretly. Carefully. Most of them anonymous, afraid of being labeled unstable. But the experiences lined up. Word for word in some places. They don't eat meat with salt on it. They sleep perfectly still. They mimic affection but never initiate it. They stand at the window at 2:13 a.m. every night and whisper. I stayed the night at Carla's. I didn't want to go back, but I had to. I couldn't leave Mark alone. I had to know how far it would go. When I got home the next morning, Daniel was sitting on the floor in the hallway. His eyes were open but unfocused. He was holding something in his lap. It was his pterodactyl toy. He hadn't touched it since he came back. When I crouched down, he looked up and whispered. I tried to remember. But he's getting quieter. I asked him who. He didn't answer. That night, I sat in the living room and stared at my phone for almost an hour. Then I wrote a message to Carla and the others. I told them everything. I asked, what do we do? How do we know if they're really gone? A few hours later, I got one reply. You don't. Not until they ask to go back. When they say the name of the place. Whatever you do, don't agree to take them. This morning, Daniel sat at the breakfast table. He looked different, like something had settled. He smiled a little more, asked for apple juice. Then he looked at me, serious, and said, "Can we go back now, Mom? I think I left him there." I froze. Left who? He didn't blink. The real one. I think he's still waiting. I don't know what to do. But I know this. My son went missing. And whatever came back wants to go home. Or bring something else here.